Ladies and gentlemen, imagine this for a moment. You stop contacting a man. No calls, no texts, no chasing, and suddenly everything shifts. He feels the silence like a storm that he didn't see coming. He starts wondering where you went, why you're not reaching out, and whether he just lost the one person who gave him certainty. This isn't about games, it's about power. The kind of power that comes when you step back and let him reveal exactly how much you mean to him. What happens next will shock you, because when you stop contacting a man, he will do 4 very specific things, and each one tells you the truth about who he really is. When you stop contacting a man, something powerful happens. It's not just about silence, it's about creating a shift in energy. Most people think that silence is simply about pulling away, but in reality, it's about reclaiming your center. It's about reminding both him and yourself that you are not going to chase what isn't moving toward you. And when that happens, men respond in very particular ways. And the first thing he will do is notice the absence. People underestimate the power of absence, but it is often louder than presence. When someone has had easy access to you, whether through texts, calls, or constant updates, they get used to that rhythm. It becomes a background music in their life, always there, always consistent. When you stop contacting him, suddenly that music stops. Silence fills the room. At first, he may not even acknowledge it, but slowly he begins to notice. He wonders why his phone isn't lighting up the same way, why his day feels a little emptier. The absence becomes a mirror that reflects how much he had gotten used to your presence. This is where curiosity kicks in. He starts to wonder what you're doing, who you're with, why you haven't reached out. And curiosity, when mixed with a little bit of loss, becomes a very powerful motivator. And the second thing he will do is test your resolve. A man, when faced with silence, often wants to see if it's real. He may send a casual text, something simple, nothing that risks too much of his ego. It could be as light as, "Hey, how's your day?" Or even something vague like reacting to an old story or reminding you of something you both once laughed about. What he's really doing in that moment is not just reaching out, he's checking. He's checking if the silence was intentional or accidental. He's checking if he still has the same influence over you. This is not always a grand gesture. Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's disguised as nonchalance. But behind it is the question, do I still matter to her? And how you respond to that moment determines whether he feels he can fall back into old patterns or whether he realizes that things have changed. And the third thing he will do is reflect. This doesn't happen immediately. In the beginning, he might distract himself, convince himself that he doesn't care, or even rationalize your silence away. But with time, when you do not break the silence for him, reflection becomes inevitable. He begins to replay interactions, moments, and conversations in his mind. He wonders if he took you for granted, if he overlooked the little efforts you made, if he misjudged how much you meant to him. Men often realize the value of something in the absence of it, not in the presence of it. It's not because they don't appreciate. It's because sometimes familiarity dulls urgency. Silence brings urgency back. He begins to ask himself questions he wasn't asking before. Was I giving enough? Did I make her feel chosen? Did I take too long to decide? And those questions can be uncomfortable, but they are the beginning of clarity. And the fourth thing he will do is decide. A man cannot sit in reflection forever. Eventually, silence forces a decision. He either steps up, recognizing that he risks losing something valuable if he doesn't act, or he steps back, revealing that he was never prepared to meet you at the level you deserve. This is where silence is so powerful, because it doesn't just show you who he is, it shows him who he is. A man faced with your absence will either decide to match your value, or he will expose that he was never going to. And both outcomes are a gift, because one brings you closer together in a stronger way, and the other frees you from waiting for someone who was never truly ready. But beyond what he does, let's talk about what this silence does for you. When you stop contacting him, you reclaim your power. So often we give our time, our energy, our presence without realizing that it's becoming one-sided. Silence reminds you of your own worth. It tells you that your value doesn't lie in chasing, convincing, or over-explaining. Your value lies in your presence, in the way you show up, in the way you give when it feels mutual and balanced. By choosing silence, you're not just influencing him, you're reinforcing to yourself that you don't need to overextend for someone to see your worth. And then here's the beautiful part. Silence reveals truth. If a man truly values you, silence will not push him away, it will draw him in. It will wake him up to the fact that he has to step forward if he wants to keep you. But if a man does not value you, silence will reveal that too. He will fade, not because you pushed him away, but because he wasn't invested enough to begin with. Silence doesn't create distance, it exposes it. And that's why the decision to stop contacting a man is not about punishment or manipulation. It's about alignment. It's about saying, if you are meant to be in my life, you will move toward me too. And if you don't, then I will not waste my time waiting. That's the shift that changes everything. And when you stop contacting him, you change the dynamic. You stop playing the role of the pursuer and allow him to show whether he is willing to pursue you. You give him the space to miss you, to value you, to reflect on what you bring into his life. And most importantly, you give yourself the space to see clearly. Because when you're no longer consumed with reaching out, you can finally step back and observe, is he stepping up or is he stepping out? And in those quiet moments, you begin to see the truth without the noise of constant contact clouding it. And that clarity, his reaction, your strength, the silence itself, becomes the most powerful answer you could ever receive. In those quiet moments, you begin to see the truth without the noise of constant contact clouding it. And that clarity, his reaction, your strength, the silence itself becomes the most powerful answer you could ever receive. And because when you create space, you invite reality to show itself. Think about it. When you're constantly filling the silence with words, messages, and gestures, it's easy for someone to lean on that energy without contributing their own. They get to sit back knowing you will always bridge the gap. But when you stop contacting him, that bridge disappears. Suddenly, he has to ask himself, am I willing to walk across this distance on my own? That's where you learn who he really is. And for many men, silence acts as a wake-up call. It disrupts their comfort zone. They may have assumed that you'll always be there, always available, always giving. But your silence shakes that foundation. It forces him to feel what life is like without your consistent presence. And in that discomfort, he has two choices. He can step into action, or he can retreat further into passivity. Either way, you get your answer without lifting a finger. And that's the beauty of it. Silence is not passive. It may look like inaction, but it's actually one of the most intentional actions you can take. It communicates a message louder than words ever could. It says, I will not fight for attention. I will not beg for effort. I will not water a garden where the other person refuses to plant. This is strength disguised as stillness. And what often surprises people is how quickly men notice the shift, the absence of messages, the absence of calls, the absence of updates. It creates a contrast he cannot ignore. Even if he tries to distract himself, there's an undeniable awareness that something is missing. That awareness gnaws at him in quiet moments, late at night when he's scrolling through his phone, in the middle of the day when he expects a message that doesn't come, or when he hears a song, sees a place, or remembers a conversation you once had. Silence follows him, reminding him that something has changed. And in that reminder, he begins to evaluate not just you, but himself. He asks, why haven't I reached out? What am I waiting for? Am I afraid? Am I avoiding something? Or am I simply unwilling to put in the effort? That internal dialogue is powerful because it reveals his readiness or lack of it. Silence is not about punishing, it's about creating the conditions for truth to surface. But while he's experiencing his side of the silence, you are experiencing yours. And your side is even more transformative. Because when you stop reaching out, you rediscover what life feels like when your energy isn't constantly poured into someone else. You notice how much lighter you feel when you're not checking your phone every hour. You realize how much mental space you have to focus on yourself, your goals, your friendships, your passions. The silence you give to him becomes a gift you give to yourself. It's the reset button you didn't know you needed. And this is why silence is such a powerful filter. It doesn't just filter men, it filters your own habits. It shows you how much of your energy you've been giving away. It shows you whether you've been investing in someone who truly deserves that investment, or whether you've been propping up a dynamic that was never balanced. And once you see that, it's very difficult to go back to the old ways. And for a man who truly values you, silence will ignite urgency. He will realize that if he does not act, he risks losing something he deeply cares about. He won't just send casual check-ins. He will step forward with real effort because he knows that silence is not accidental. He knows it means something. But for a man who doesn't value you in the way you deserve, silence will not stir him. He may fade, he may delay, he may stay distant. And as painful as that is, it is also the clearest form of honesty you could ever ask for. And because silence forces alignment, it forces people to show you where they truly stand. Words can be deceptive, excuses can be endless, but action or the absence of it does not lie. And when you stop contacting him, you stop giving him the comfort of words and excuses. You hold up a mirror, and that mirror shows him exactly where he stands in relation to you. And here's the deeper truth: silence doesn't just reveal him, it reshapes you. It teaches you patience, restraint, and self-respect. It teaches you that love is not proven by how much you chase, but by how much you hold space for someone to step into their role. It teaches you that your value is not tied to someone else's recognition, but to the way you recognize yourself. In that silence, you grow stronger, you grow clearer, you grow more certain of what you deserve. And when you stop contacting a man, you may feel an initial wave of fear that you'll lose him, fear that he'll forget, fear that you've made a mistake. But that fear is only the echo of old habits. Once you move past it, you find freedom. You find that silence is not empty, it's full of answers, full of clarity, full of strength you didn't know you had. And as days pass, you begin to see the reality unfold. He either steps forward with conviction or he drifts away into the background. But either way, you win, because silence has given you the truth. It has shown you what he is willing to do when you are no longer the one carrying the connection. And that truth, clear, undeniable, and unshakable, is far more valuable than any temporary comfort words could ever give. And that truth, clear, undeniable, and unshakable, is far more valuable than any temporary comfort words could ever give. And because when truth shows up, it gives you power. It strips away the illusions you may have been holding on to, the excuses you may have created for his behavior, the hope you may have used to justify the imbalance. Truth has a way of cutting through the noise, and silence is what invites it in. When you stop contacting him, you're no longer feeding the fantasy of what could be. You're looking directly at what is. That's the moment you begin to stand taller, because you are no longer afraid to see reality for what it is. And there's something magnetic about that shift. When you reclaim your energy, when you stop pouring into someone who isn't equally pouring into you, your presence becomes stronger. You become more attractive, not just to him, but to everyone around you. Because confidence has a frequency, and silence is often its loudest expression. When you no longer chase, people feel that you are centered, grounded, and secure. You radiate the energy of someone who knows their worth without needing validation. And that energy is irresistible. And he may not always know how to articulate it, but he feels it. He feels the difference between someone who is desperately trying to hold on to his attention and someone who has stepped back and said, if you want me in your life, show me. The second carries weight. It carries mystery. It carries value. And when he feels that shift, he either rises to meet it or he falls away from it. But either way, you remain rooted in your strength. And what silence also does is give him the gift of responsibility. When you stop initiating, you stop carrying the burden of connection on your shoulders. The ball is in his court now. If he wants to see you, he has to ask. If he wants to hear your voice, he has to call. If he wants to know how your day went, he has to step forward. And this is important because relationships thrive when responsibility is shared. One person cannot always be the engine while the other sits back and enjoys the ride. Silence puts the engine in his hands, and you get to see if he chooses to drive. And sometimes the result of that is disappointing. You might see him do nothing. You might see him drift, make no effort, or only show up with crumbs of attention. And that can sting, but that sting is still a blessing because it saves you from pouring into a cup that will never be full. Better to know now than to keep investing for months or years, hoping he will one day change. Silence saves you time. It saves you heartache. It gives you clarity sooner rather than later, and other times silence awakens him. It makes him realize just how much he misses the energy you brought into his life. It reminds him of the little things, your kindness, your humor, your support, your presence, and that realization often pushes him to step up, to come forward with more seriousness, more effort, more consistency. He realizes he can no longer take your presence for granted because it is no longer guaranteed. And that realization changes him. But here's the key: silence is not about controlling him, it's about centering you. The purpose is not to play games or manipulate an outcome. The purpose is to align yourself with what you truly deserve. By stepping back, you give both of you the chance to show your true colors. You get to see whether he values what you bring, and he gets to decide whether he's ready to rise to that value. Silence doesn't force, it reveals. And in that revelation, you gain strength. You learn to sit with discomfort instead of rushing to fix it. You learn to allow space instead of filling it with unnecessary effort. You learn to trust that if something is meant for you, it will not require you to beg or chase. This lesson, once learned, changes not only how you deal with him, but how you deal with every relationship in your life. It sets a new standard. And think about the times you've overextended in the past, sending messages when you got no reply, planning when the other person showed no effort, giving reassurance when none was being given to you. That cycle drains you. It makes you question your value. But the moment you choose silence, you break that cycle. You declare without words, I will not give more than I receive. I will not settle for half effort. I will not compromise my peace just to keep someone else comfortable. That declaration, though silent, is louder than any speech you could ever make. And as you live in that silence, something else happens. You begin to attract better, not just from him, but from others. People who respect your boundaries, people who see your worth, people who are drawn to your energy because it is no longer scattered or desperate. Silence sharpens your signal. It makes your value unmistakable. And the right people respond to that signal because they recognize strength when they see it. And so while he may be wrestling with his absence of you, reflecting, deciding, and either stepping up or fading away, you are transforming. You are becoming someone who no longer needs constant reassurance to feel whole. Someone who can sit with uncertainty and still feel secure. Someone who knows that love is not built on chasing, but on mutual desire and respect. And the truth is, when you embody that energy, you don't lose, ever. If he steps up, he meets a stronger, clearer, more grounded version of you. If he doesn't, you walk away with your dignity intact, ready for someone who will. Silence has done its work. It has revealed, refined, and reminded you of the strength that was always within you. Silence has done its work. It has revealed, refined, and reminded you of the strength that was always within you. And because strength isn't always about speaking up, explaining yourself, or proving your point. Sometimes strength is restraint. It's the ability to hold back when every part of you wants to reach out, when the temptation to fill the void feels overwhelming. That moment when your hand hovers over the phone and you choose not to press send, that's strength. And every time you practice it, you reinforce to yourself that you are not ruled by impulse, not ruled by fear, not ruled by the need for constant reassurance. You are ruled by standards, by dignity, and by the quiet confidence that the right person will never need to be chased. And then here's the truth about men: they respect what they earn. When something is given without any effort on their part, it may feel nice, but it rarely feels valuable. The moment they have to lean in, step forward, and make a move, their appreciation deepens. It's not about playing hard to get, it's about being true to your worth. When you stop contacting him, you give him the space to earn his place in your life. And if he chooses not to, that choice tells you everything you need to know. And there's a difference between someone who reaches out because they genuinely miss you and someone who only responds because you've initiated. Silence draws that difference into the light. Without your effort filling the gaps, you can see clearly whether he has the desire to bridge them on his own. And that clarity is priceless because it saves you from confusing interest with convenience. And sometimes the quiet that follows your silence feels heavy at first. You might interpret it as rejection or indifference. But often it's just processing. He's noticing, questioning, reflecting, and wrestling with what to do next. Remember, not every man moves at the same pace. For some, the realization is instant. For others, it builds slowly until they can no longer ignore it. Your job is not to control his timeline. It's to stand firm in your own. And while you wait, you're not really waiting. You're living. That's the beauty of silence. It pulls you back into your own world. Suddenly, the hours you used to spend overthinking are spent on things that actually bring you joy. The energy you use to pour into constant communication is redirected into your passions, your health, your friendships, your growth. You become more radiant, more fulfilled, more magnetic. Not because you're trying to get a reaction, but because you're genuinely investing in yourself. And ironically, that shift often makes him notice even more, and men are deeply drawn to women who have a full life, who are not dependent on them for validation or happiness. When he feels that your world doesn't revolve around him, it awakens something in him. It challenges him to step into the role of someone who adds value, Rather than just being the center of your focus, your silence communicates that without a word. It shows that your life is already whole, and if he wants to be part of it, he must contribute, not consume. And then here's another powerful truth silence teaches patience. In a world where everything is instant, instant messages, instant likes, instant gratification, patience has become rare. But patience is where real relationships are tested. It's easy to rush in, to demand answers, to crave constant reassurance. It's harder to pause, to step back, and to trust the process. Yet that's where the strongest bonds are built. When you stop contacting him, you're teaching yourself patience. You're showing yourself that you can withstand uncertainty without crumbling, that you can wait for real action, not just empty words. And as you sit in that space, your vision sharpens. You start to see beyond the surface. You begin to notice patterns you might have ignored before. The consistency of his effort, the sincerity of his actions, the depth of his intentions. Silence makes you more observant, more attuned, more aware of what truly matters. And that awareness protects you. It stops you from being swayed by temporary charm and keeps you aligned with lasting value. And for him, silence is often a test of character. Does he respect the space, or does he get defensive? Does he step forward with genuine effort, or does he only send half-hearted breadcrumbs? Does he recognize your worth and rise to meet it, or does he retreat because he's not ready for the level of commitment you deserve? These answers come not through words, but through behavior, and silence gives him the opportunity to reveal them. And it's important to understand that silence is not rejection, it's an invitation. An invitation for him to step into his role, to show you what place you truly hold in his life. An invitation for him to prove, not with promises, but with action. And if he accepts that invitation, the connection deepens. If he declines, then you've lost nothing. You've simply gained clarity. And that's the paradox of silence. It feels like letting go, but in reality, it's gaining control. Not control over him, but control over yourself, your emotions, your standards, your boundaries. It puts you back in the driver's seat of your own life. Instead of reacting to every little thing he does or doesn't do, you're observing, choosing, and deciding from a place of strength. And when you operate from that place, everything changes. You no longer chase love, you attract it. You no longer settle for crumbs, you wait for the feast. You no longer question your worth, you embody it. And whether he steps up or fades away, you remain whole, secure, and unshaken. Because silence has taught you the most important lesson of all: love is not proven by how much you pursue, but by how much both people are willing to meet in the middle